weeks we've really talked about the emotional impact of living in the time of the coronavirus and how Judaism can provide us with some guidance or some comfort. This week, we're going to turn to a topic that's a little bit different, and that is, how does Judaism address the needs of the individual versus the needs of the community? And I've been thinking a lot about this because we have, not an overwhelming number, but small groups of protesters who would like, to open up our society immediately or very quickly, who may or may not think that the restrictions that have been imposed upon us by the government, whether local, or state or federal, are reasonable, and who feel that their right to make a living, is paramount, and there are others who are concerned, of course, about the economic fallout of the virus on our nation and on our future. But the vast majority of people, I think, would err on the side, or are erring on the side, of caution, and think that a more measured approach is the one to take, because the needs of the community have to take precedent over the needs of a particular individual or a few individuals. So Judaism has so much to say about this. This topic, maybe Judaism has more to say about than the others combined. So I put together a lesson. Let me just grab it. I think I figured out also how to share this with y'all without all of the computer stuff at the top, and that is to make it into a PDF. So once you make it into a PDF, you no longer have all the computer stuff at the top because you're just showing the documents. I'm going through that in case anyone wants to know. However, if there are any typos, I can't go in and fix them in a PDF. So I caught 3, and I'd already asked Liz to make the lesson into a PDF 3 times already, catching different typos. So until I learn how to do it myself, I didn't want to ask her one more time, but somebody will walk me through it. Anyway, the needs of the individual versus those of the community. I almost called this first section, modern commentaries. You could laugh because the first one's from 1623 from John Donne, but when you're looking at Jewish texts, this is contemporary. 1623 is very recent. But he writes, of course, no man is an island entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. Any man's death diminishes me because I am involved in mankind, and therefore never send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for thee. So Donne's perspective on the relationship between an individual and his, her, or their community is that, of course, we are all part of the community, and the community needs need to take precedent, that it's each of our responsibility, right? The bell tolls for us to step up to strengthen the continent or the main, so that nobody dies, or nobody goes down, basically. And obviously, how does this relate to the time in which we're living? Basically, Donne says that the needs of the community are paramount. That's how I read it, at least. If you read it differently, you can, put it in the chat or whatever, and I'm sure it'll pop right up here. Wait, let me just see. What? I just got rid of it. No, I don't want to stop share. Just a minute. Go away. Oh, here we are. Okay. I was just looking to see if I could see the chat, but I can't from here. So anyway, and here is another comment that sort of explains perhaps what some of the tension is. This is from a recent article in The Atlantic. We are so addicted to the concept of individual responsibility that we have a fragmented healthcare system, a weak social safety net, and a culture of averting our eyes from other people's physical vulnerability. This manifests in dangerous policy. Many Americans don't have paid sick days and lack good childcare options. They are therefore likely to continue to show up to work or school even when sick or risk losing their jobs. And I want to add, as it is in the case with one congregant who shared with me, or they are being basically given ultimatums by their employers to show up to work or risk losing their jobs when they don't have adequate childcare because none of the schools are open. So nobody with a child has adequate childcare unless you're wealthy enough to afford like a nanny or whatever. No, and then she quotes from Dunn, "No person is an island. The nation that believes in individuals more than it values community risks its own survival. Accepting and embracing this might be the tougher path than muscling through each by each, whatever comes." So what is the result of our prioritizing individuals over the whole community? I would say the result is that there are large swaths of the community that are underserved, you know, in many ways, whether it be healthcare or childcare, or you know, enough money for food, medicine, and rent, you know, like just sort of basic needs. That's what happens. And of course, that's what our nation looks like. You know, it's what do you call it, a market economy. And, you know, the people that are higher earners for whatever reason, you know, whether they've worked harder or they had better opportunities or both, are in a better situation. And that's always the case, right? How does this attitude risk our survival as a nation and a world? So I'm going to pause there and see if anyone wants to weigh in. I can answer all these questions. I made them up. But if anybody wants to say anything, you're not obligated to speak at all. But does anyone want to say anything about that? We're going to have lots of Jewish texts in the next 3 sections. So Sylvia?
What I see over and over and over again is that we forget upon whose shoulders or whose backs the rest of us stand. So we forget about the people who clean our institutions. We forget about the people who put food or put anything in the warehouses. We forget about the people we do not see.
Okay, that's true for sure. And how does that risk our survival as a nation?
But if you, for example, what I saw when I worked at a hospital at Fort Hood, they forgot that the majority of their employees, English was a second language, but they expected them to pass a test that they didn't know how to give, and it eliminated every Korean worker.
Okay, all right. I hear exactly what you're saying. I hear what you're saying exactly. I don't disagree at all. I'm just trying to move us toward the topic, which is, how does this affect the fabric of society?
It can't
function. And how it affects the fabric of society, of course, is that we have a huge underclass. And in the case of a virus, which is non-discriminating, right? If you have large segments of the population who are more susceptible, it spreads to everybody. You know, I always think of, you know, I live in Ghent, which is and the temple is in Ghent, which is a very high income area with a low crime rate. But if I go a few streets up, like past 21st to 22nd, there's railroad tracks. And on the other side of the railroad tracks is an area called Park Place, which is one of the poorest sections of Norfolk with one of the highest crime rates. And to me, it's like a joke. You know, those are arbitrary lines. To think that what happens on the other side of the railroad tracks doesn't affect me is crazy thinking, because it has to affect me. I mean, it's 5 blocks away. You know what I'm saying? So I think we lose sight of the fact that we really are part of one continent and are part of the main. Abby, did you want to say something?
Wait, I gotta unmute. Hang on.
They unmuted you.
Oh, okay.
The ladies are right on it. They're on it.
Thanks. I guess what Sylvia was getting at was that we by focusing on the individual over the whole community, we lose sight of that it's only a generation or two before us that nobody would came here speaking English.
Right. Nobody comes here speaking
We are
English.
part of that whole community that's, and so the people on the other side of the tracks, whether that's their issue or their other, racial disparities, we're neglecting everyone, which is the point of this.
Right. Right. Christianity has like this one text about like, or maybe it's not even Christianity. Maybe it's some philosopher. I don't know the origin because I wasn't thinking of this when I created the packet. But we're judged by how we treat the least among us, basically, and we're not doing so well in our society. Okay, what might accepting the reality of the weaknesses and indifference in our system and acting to correct them look like? The bell tolls for thee. Jane, did you want to say something about this, or were you on the one before?
Well, I really was just thinking about the one before, and the obvious thing is that this is a virus that is invisible, that we don't know how it behaves. It absolutely does not discriminate, even between humans and animals, apparently.
Correct.
And it's so profoundly disruptive. And if we try, the difficulty is that the economy is also the lifeblood of everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And if big segments of it, like food production and all of this, or the hospitals are overwhelmed, we are definitely all in this together. And the way to address it, unfortunately, is what we've been doing. And there's a big conflict between what we've been doing and trying to save our economy.
Well, you're talking about what we've been doing to mitigate the effects of the virus. I'm talking more, and there, I don't have there's no quick answer to this, but even more of a big picture is, how do we address these shortfalls in our society where we really don't see
more socialist.
Yeah, well,
but that is anathema. So
yeah.
We provide systematically through our government to everyone what they need.
Right. Yeah. Right. Okay. So the last text actually came from a rabbi. I posted this comment in two different rabbi groups that I'm a part of. And this was a comment from somebody, which I thought was really worth thinking about. So she said, American notions of freedom, which are based on English law, differ rather radically from Jewish biblical notions. While there are some noble aspects of the American take on freedom from overbearing monarchical power, the freedom being touted in these rallies demanding that businesses be allowed to open derives to my mind from the most noxious tradition in this country. The freedom espoused by the southern states, obviously she's not a southerner, and others to make as much profit as possible, which included a freedom to enslave and torture others. The elevation of private property rights in American legal tradition as the highest right of all, enshrined in the Constitution and very much including a right to own slaves, has to my mind infected our discussion of what freedom really means. The right to do my own thing, including harming myself and being totally blind to the reality that this might also harm others, think about smoking in public, seems to stem from this noxious history. It is not, in fact, freedom, but a desire to escape all constraints of responsibility, and it should be called out as such. In Judaism, by contrast, there is almost no talk of rights. That's a post-Enlightenment invention, only obligations. A person freed from slavery has the obligation to care for a people freed from slavery has the obligation to care for the entire community, and in so doing, lift up every individual. I take the building of the Mishkan, that's the portable sanctuary in the wilderness, as the enactment of this ideal. In coming together for a holy communal project, each individual brings their unique gift and is uplifted and exalted in the process. True freedom is the wholesome interaction of individuals within a community not being released from responsibility. It is marked by mutuality, consent, and debate, with a commitment to hearing minority voices, but acting for the good of the whole. To oppress is to remove the well-being of another. It is the enactment of unfreedom. It is violence. So that was her view. And I thought it was interesting, you know, that Judaism doesn't speak about rights. It speaks about responsibility and obligation. It's a very different system. And I think that's why sometimes it comes into conflict with our modern sensibilities. And I wasn't even thinking about this when I, you know, chose this thing that she wrote, this quote. But like, for example, you know, there was a time, even not that long ago, maybe 50 years ago, where, you know, where everybody felt it was their responsibility to belong to a congregation, to be part of the Jewish community. Today, it's everybody's a Jew by choice. You know, nobody has to support anything they don't want to. And so the downside of that is that some of our communal institutions aren't sustainable when maybe only 40% of the community actually engages with them and supports them, etc. Let me just look here because I saw there were a few things in the chat. Let me move this over so that I don't. Right, so okay, that's okay. Okay, good. Let's, so according to her, I just said that. Do we prioritize greed, money, and profits over the well-being of others and our greater human family? Some, yes. Most, no, I hope. You know, that's my view of it. Of course, the collapse of the economy is not the same as one individual, you know, wanting to be a gazillionaire. I understand that. You know, they're not the same thing. Do you see the link between the values we do or do not hold today and our history of slavery? I think an argument can be made, this whole idea that property rights and profit are paramount. You know, I think we can make that argument, but we're not going to make it right now because I just wanted us to think about it. Okay, now we're going on to Jewish texts, which is really where I want to go. Every man is a piece of the continent, part of the main. Okay, there are a whole series of commandments. These are from the book of Exodus, some are in Leviticus. There are, upon which there are volumes, and I am saying volumes of commentary in the Mishnah and Talmud. Volumes and volumes. So obviously we can't talk about all the volumes and volumes, but I can bring you the Torah texts, but you'll see they all have the same fundamental principle associated with them. You can't get away from it in Judaism. You just can't. So when an ox gores a man or a woman to death, the ox shall be stoned and its flesh not be eaten, but the owner of the ox is not to be punished. He's not to be punished because it's not his fault. You know, he didn't know that this was an ox that was dangerous. If, however, the ox has been in the habit of goring, they say an ox being in the habit of goring means he's gored 3 times. He's gored somebody 3 times or another animal. And its owner, though warned, has failed to guard it, and it kills a man or a woman, the ox shall be stoned, and its owner too shall be put to death. So talk about responsibility of the individual for the community. If you have a goring ox, or let's put it this way, a mean pit bull that hurts other animals or people, you are responsible for making sure that animal doesn't get out and hurt anyone to the point of death. I mean, that's, you know, not that they did it, but that's the threat. If ransom is laid upon him, he must pay whatever is laid upon him to redeem his life. So too, if it gores a minor, male or female, the owner shall be dealt with according to the same rule. But if the ox gores a slave man or woman, he shall pay 30 shekels of silver, likely the value of a slave, to the master, and the ox shall be stoned, comparable today to killing a rabid dog. You know, that's what happens. When a man's ox injures his neighbor's ox and it dies, they shall sell the live ox and divide its price. They shall also divide the dead animal. If, however, it is known that the ox was in the habit of goring and its owner failed to guard it, he must restore ox for ox, but shall keep the dead animal, meaning he has to dispose of the animal. That's what they mean by that. How do I know? I read a million commentaries. But anyway, so the goring ox, there are 3 tractates of the Talmud. Baba Batra, Baba Metzia, Baba Baba, no, that's not the last one. But anyway, the point is that these are massive volumes of thousands of years, several thousands of years of arguments and discussions of the rabbis about what happens with this ox. It's also like, what if your neighbor's ox is wandering in the road? You're responsible to keep it and take good care of it until it can be returned to there's a million different examples like this. And here's just another 2 that are on the same vein. When a man opens a pit or digs a pit, like a hole in your property, and doesn't cover it, and an ox or an ass falls into it, the one responsible for the pit must make restitution. He shall pay the price to the owner, but shall keep the dead animal. Again, the responsibility rests on the individual who dug the pit and didn't put caution cones and tape around it, right? And third, when a fire is started and spreads to thorns so that stacked, standing, or growing grain is consumed, he who started the fire must make restitution. So just in answering these questions, I'm going to go through quickly because we're going to get to ones that I think are a little bit more interesting. In our tradition, it's very clear that the person that doesn't take responsibility is, for whatever his goring ox or the hole in his property or the fire that started in his grain store that spreads elsewhere, that person is responsible and obligated to, at the very least, make restitution, right? Or at the very most, give his life. But they never really did that. Like when they say stone the wayward son, nobody ever stoned a wayward son. But maybe it scared a wayward son into not being so wayward, but I don't know. Okay. Obviously, Judaism values your obligations more than your rights. And according to Judaism, can one do what one wants, whenever one wants, however one wants? No, you can't. You just can't. Now, here's like probably the best example. I didn't put the site in because I forgot, but let me make myself a note. That's on page 3. That has to go in there, the site. Okay, the site is from Leviticus Rabbah 4:6. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai taught a parable. Men were on a ship. One of them took a drill and started drilling underneath him. The other said to him, "What are you sitting and doing?" He replied, "What do you care? Isn't it not under my seat that I'm drilling?" They said to him, "But water will rise and flood us all on this ship." Right? You can't drill a hole under your seat and say that, nobody else matters, because a sinking ship drowns everybody. Right? I think this is great. I mean, I've seen this story before, but not attributed to a Jewish source, but it does. It comes right out of rabbinic tradition. So this is wonderful. If we are only for ourselves, we all die. If a pandemic spreads in a poor, underserved neighborhood that doesn't have adequate nutrition and doesn't have adequate, understanding of hygiene or adequate access to medical care, and they're, 5 blocks away, it's going to spread to us too. That's just the way it goes. There's no way that we can separate ourselves from the main. You just can't. Okay, can you think of examples when this might ever be okay? You might be able to think of examples, but I hope not. I really don't want to try to think of too many examples, but it's, dangerous. I'm going to try not to call on people who have already shared to give a chance to others to share. If it turns out that the same 5 people are the ones who want to share, then I'll come back to you. You know what I mean? All right. Any man's death diminishes me, for I am involved in mankind. Okay. These are some more well-known Torah texts. So this one is also very, very famous. When you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap all the way to the edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. You shall not pick your vineyard bare or gather the fallen fruit of your vineyard. You shall leave them for the poor and the stranger. I am the Lord your God. So basically, what is this saying? Somebody can answer this, probably who hasn't talked already, because it's a more of a interpreting the text rather than you know what I mean, rather than sort of comment, you know what I mean, giving your opinion. Melissa.
I interpret it as that just in our day-to-day living, that there should be a certain amount set aside that is to be meant for helping others, donations, whether it be through whatever kind of energy, whether it's our physical energy that we're emitting off by doing something, or energy meaning monetary.
Good, good. So excellent. So that's already an interpretation. Every translation's an interpretation, but that is exactly the point of this text. This text actually is the foundation of our entire system of tzedakah, right? And our arranging the levels of giving by prioritizing a person's dignity. Very good, Sylvia. It allows others to help themselves. Excellent. So when you have, I'm just going to show you, if this is your field and you're plowing, you don't plow the four corners. And that way, poor and hungry people always know that if they need food, they can come to your field and they can take from these four corners, because that's left for the poor. Which means, right, that you always, in some way, and I like how Melissa said it, according to your energy, however it works for you, you do that. You leave that for those who are in need. Right. Interesting that charity here, Alice, is not just for the poor. It also includes the stranger. Responsibility to share your good fortune. Exactly. All of the above. All of the above. This part, you shall not pick your, you don't harvest the edges of your field and you don't gather the gleanings. That means the things that have fallen. If anyone has a fruit tree or, has ever been on a farm, or goes strawberry picking in Pungo, whatever your, thing is, that some fruit falls, it's overripe or whatever. Anything that falls on the ground, you also can't pick up. That's also for the poor and the stranger. So this ensures, right, that if there are members of the society or the community that are in need, that their needs are taken care of. What page is this? I'm making myself a little note here. 4. And the highest level of giving is when the giver is anonymous and the recipient is anonymous. Maimonides has a ladder of tzedakah, and the highest rung, the most optimal way of giving, is where the donor is anonymous and the recipient is anonymous. Very cute. Okay. All right. I think this is sort of self-explanatory. Elizabeth.
In that list by Maimonides, I believe the top one is also gifts that allow the other person to become independent.
Yes, which this one does not, right? Because it's not, this one does not, right? The top one would be, teaching someone how to fish, yes, rather than giving them the fish. Yeah. Exactly. This one doesn't have that. This one just has the possibility of the anonymous, even though it's possible that the stranger or the poor person or the hungry person collecting the gleanings or the food from the corners of the fields might actually know who owns the field, but we just don't know. Okay, here we go. You shall not render an unfair decision Do not favor the poor or show deference to the rich. Judge your neighbor fairly. Do not deal basely with your fellows. Do not profit by the blood of your neighbor. I am the Lord. You shall not hate your kinsman in your heart. Reprove your neighbor, but incur no guilt because of him. You shall not take vengeance or bear a grudge against your kinsfolk. Love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord. And then the next few verses that, are about the citizen, the stranger who resides among you shall also be like your neighbor, that you should treat them the same way. Love your neighbor as yourself. So what does it mean to love your neighbor as yourself? What does that mean? Any ideas? To love your neighbor as yourself. Okay, do unto others. Good, Abby. Right, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. But basically it means what you want for yourself or your loved ones, you should want for your neighbor, right? And what you don't want for yourself, you shouldn't want for your neighbor. So if you want yourself to be satiated and prosperous and healthy, etc., you should also want that for your neighbor. I'm not making this up. This stuff comes right out of the Torah. Carol Brum writes, do not hold yourself above anyone else. Andrea and Ron write, treat them as you would want to be treated. Dorianne says it's the foundation of our temple soup kitchen. Exactly. All of these commandments, have to do with treating people fairly. And the premise is you want to be treated fairly, right? Now, of course, one of the horrible things with the pandemic was nobody, up until very recently, like 3 days ago, nobody could get tested, not even medical professionals. So, if that was definitely, there it was equal. But yes, we're all in this together, Diane McCabe. Correct. We are all in this together. And that's it. From John Donne to, the Atlantic magazine, to Rabbi Spitzer, to Exodus, to Leviticus, it's all the same, right? It's almost impossible to find anything in our tradition that teaches us different. You just can't find it. You just can't find it. And, I'm not saying this in a partisan way, but this is why 70 to 80% of Jews vote Democrat, because this is what we're taught over and over and over and over and over again. And that means social programs. It just does, So that's the problem, that's not the problem, but that's the reality of the foundation of our Torah. It was written by a group of rabbis, or many groups of rabbis, really they think 4 different groups of rabbis over 500 years, all of whom kept drilling in the message. In order to sustain our people and our community, we have to take care of each other. It just is, it's the same with healthcare. If you Google me on YouTube, I did a talk years ago at Temple, but for some other organization, about healthcare, and Judaism guarantees members of its community a modicum of healthcare, like not excessive healthcare, like keep somebody alive no matter what for millions of dollars healthcare, but basic healthcare for everyone. That's just what it says in all of our texts. And if you look it up, you'll see what I said, because I don't remember right now. All right. So here come 2 examples that are, okay, good. Let me just see a couple of things here. Betsy says, we wear a mask not for ourselves, but for the other guy. That's true, right? I don't even want to get into what we're learning about. Singing is one of the most virile ways of infecting others with the virus, singing. So there's all kinds of stuff being done on that right now. But we're in for a dry music spell because it's bad. There's almost no safe way for a choir to practice together because the air things can travel 30 feet, not 6. So 30 feet away from each other they'd have to be. Anyway, the Greeks instructed that you should treat everyone as if he or she were God in disguise. Mother Teresa wrote about the many distressing disguises of God. Yes, absolutely. All right, let's look at a couple, like, it was not commandments, but like actual stories from the Torah and what they teach us. When they were in Hatzerot, Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman who he had married, for he had married a Cushite woman. They think that this means a black woman or a dark-skinned woman. We don't know for sure. We'll never know for sure. But anyway, Moses and Aaron were like, you know how that goes. And they said, has the Lord spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken also through us? Meaning, like, who died and made him, king? And the Lord heard it. Now, Moses was a very humble man, more so than any other man on earth. Suddenly, the Lord called to Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, come out, you three, to the tent of meeting. This is worse than the rabbi calling you into her office. So the three of them went out. And the Lord came down in a pillar of cloud and stood at the entrance to the tent of meeting and called out, Aaron and Miriam. And they both came forward. And God said, hear now my words. When a prophet of the Lord arises among you, I, the Lord, make myself known to him in a vision. I speak with him in a dream. But not so with my servant Moses. He is trusted above all in my house. With him, I speak mouth to mouth, right? Not even in a dream or a vision, like mouth to mouth, plainly and not in riddles. And he beholds the likeness of the Lord. How then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? And the anger of the Lord was kindled against them, and God departed. So they're in trouble, right? God does not like this. Not gossip in general, but for sure not against Moses. And when the cloud was removed from over the tent, behold, Miriam was stricken with snow white scales, leprosy, right? When Aaron turned toward Miriam, he saw that she was leprous. And Aaron, these are 3 siblings, right? Everybody knows. It goes Aaron, Miriam, Moses, I think. When Aaron, he saw that she was leprous. And Aaron said to Moses, oh, my Lord, account not to us the sin we have committed in our folly. Like, please don't blame us for our own stupidity. Let her not be as one dead who emerges from her mother's womb with half her flesh eaten away. So Moses cried unto the Lord, please God, heal her. It's 5 little words, El na Rapha na la, shortest prayer in Torah. It's like a quick mishaberach, right? El na Rapha na la. God, please heal her. So this is Moses. He's always takes up for the people that are, rise up against him. He never says to God, go ahead, kill them. They deserve it. They wronged me. He never does that. Never. When the children of Israel are like that, with the golden calf, he pleads on their behalf. Sodom and Gomorrah, they weren't even Israelites. No, that was Abraham. Sorry. But the same idea. So, he says, please God, heal her. But the Lord said unto Moses, if her father had but spit in her face, would she not bear her shame for 7 days? Let her be shut out of the camp for 7 days, and after that, let her be readmitted. So at the very least, he kicks her out of God makes Moses kick her out of the camp for 7 days, which was probably very lonely. Not to mention isolating and dangerous. So Miriam was shut out of the camp for 7 days. This is the important, it's all important, and the people did not journey on until Miriam was readmitted. After that, the people set out from Hatzerot and encamped in the wilderness of Paran. Right. A Cushite, Paul Walker saying that means black. We think, Paul. We're not 100% sure. We think. Linda Spindell says, put her in timeout. Exactly. So what happens to Miriam and why? She was gossiping against her brother, being critical against Moses. So she's struck with leprosy and then put outside the camp. So here's it. Does the punishment seem fair? That's one question. And why doesn't Aaron get punished for the same crime? He does the same thing. Why doesn't he get punished? I think we all know the answer to that one, right? It wasn't because he was a man, exactly. It wasn't written by women. The women are usually blamed. But anyway, because that really, he should have gotten stricken too. If anyone was going to get stricken, he should have done too. Remember when we, oh no, this wasn't you guys. Was it you guys? When we studied Tazria Mitzora, I once said that gossip is equivalent to murder. That's right. When you embarrass someone and they flush, they turn red, that our sages tell us that's like spilling blood. Embarrassing someone, shaming them, talking bad about them is like killing them. You destroy their reputation. We had it in Tazria Mitzora too. The reason given, Steve Kosin, cover your ears because this is in your little sweetheart's Devar Torah for her bat mitzvah. But when, you know, the reason given by the rabbis for why people were struck with leprosy, or what leprosy, why they became a metzorah, was they said it came from the words motzi shem ra, you know, one who brings a bad name onto someone else, you know, who talks bad about others. Okay, so here's the question. During Miriam's illness, what happens to the Israelites' journey? What happens to their journey while she's sick? They wait for her. Thank you. It stalls. They wait for her, right? It's postponed. The whole community waits, right? They don't move on and say, oh, let's just leave her behind. You know, she's sick, she's going to die, right? They wait, meaning the entire forward motion of the Jewish people or the Israelites to the promised land is on hold for this one person's illness, right? They all experience, Abby says, they all experience the lesson, both lessons. The community suffers for her misdeeds, exactly. And this is just like I thought about including some of these texts, but I think I can just tell you because we all know, and I remind you this always, but when we sit in services on Yom Kippur, and it's something like 54 times between Kol Nidre and Ne'ilah, we say, for the sin we have committed against you by doing this. For the sin we have committed for doing that, right? Al chet shechatanu lefanecha. Al chet shechatanu lefanecha. For the sin we have committed. Now, I can tell you I am not an adulterer. I'm not, right? But I say for the sin we have committed because maybe I'm not an adulterer, but I'm a glutton and the guy 2 seats over is an adulterer. Collectively, we're all guilty and we're all responsible. And we're obligated to take responsibility for our societal weaknesses. That's just the way it is. Because if we have a society that's riddled with idolaters, adulterers, and murderers, our whole society is doomed. Right? Or our whole community is doomed. It doesn't work, you know, to say, oh, well, not me. I didn't do it. You know, that's what children say, right? I didn't do it. You know, not me, but, you know. Okay, someone's saying sometimes prioritizing the individual strengthens and nourishes the community. When individuals make an aliyah to the Torah, the community is enriched. Is that what you mean? Or make aliyah to Israel? I'm not sure. But either way.
Well,
Yes, of course, of course.
I was thinking, I misspelled it there. When they go up for a bar mitzvah or name ceremony or almost anything else, it enriches the whole community.
Yes, yes, but that is that's a really a good example. It's similar to a wedding. It's that those events are supposed to take place in the context of community because the ritual of the individuals really belongs to the whole community and strengthens the whole community. Mm-hmm. It's still more about the community than the individual. which is why our B'nai Mitzvah ceremonies are open to the whole congregation. You can't say, I don't want him to come, I don't want her to come. You know, it doesn't go like that. It's a communal celebration. It focuses on the individual child or children, but it belongs to the whole community, or uplifts the whole community. That's more motivation for Tikkun Olam. Even if we're not guilty, we must help those who are to change their ways. Very good. Okay, so let's move on. Here's another great example. Okay, this one might be familiar also. You know, really this class, every time I pick these Bible illustrations, they're like my favorite Bible stories, you know. The Lord, this is from Numbers also. The Lord spoke to Moses saying, send men out to scout the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelite people. Send one man from each of their ancestral tribes, each one a chieftain among them. The next paragraph is, you know, from this tribe we send Elizabeth. From this tribe we send, you know, Melissa. From this tribe we send Liz. So I cut out all the names, but just believe me, they picked one chieftain from each of the 12 tribes. Moses said to them, go up there in the Negev and on into the hill country and see what kind of country it is. Are the people who dwell in it strong or weak, few or many? Is the country in which they dwell good or bad? Are the towns they live in open or fortified? Is the soil rich or poor? Is it wooded or not? And take pains to bring back some of the fruit of the land. So this is Moses asking these 12 men to go and scout the land of Canaan, right? Where they are, where God has told them this is going to be your land. So the problem is people live there. They're going to have to conquer it. So God instructs Moses to instruct the people to go check it out and see what's going on there. You know, how easy is it to conquer? You know, yay or nay? All right. And then I skipped, you know, another part. It doesn't matter. It's, you know, just more of the same. At the end of 40 days, they returned from scouting the land. They went straight to Moses and Aaron and the whole community, and they made their report to them and to the whole community. This is what they told them. We came to the land you sent us to. It does indeed flow with milk and honey. However, the people who inhabit the country are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. Moreover, we saw the Anakites there. The Anakites are these like mythical giant people. They said there's, you know, in the commentaries I read, there's no reason to believe that the people there were any bigger than any other people, but we saw, you know, giants there. Caleb, he was one of the scouts, hushed the there's another one, hushed the people. Hushed the people before Moses and said, let us by all means go up and we shall gain possession of it, for we shall surely overcome it. He's like, we can do it. We can do it. Let's do it. But the men who had gone up with him said, we cannot attack the people, for it is stronger than we. Thus they spread calumnies among the Israelites about the land they had scouted, saying, the country that we traversed and scouted is one that devours its settlers. All the people that we saw in it are men of great size. We saw the Nephilim there. These are the demigods, the giant demigods. The Anakites are part of the Nephilim. It actually says that in the Torah. The Anakites are part of the Nephilim. And we look like grasshoppers to ourselves, and so we must have looked to them. So what are 10 of the 12 scouts basically saying? The governors from our states, right? What, Sandy Forte, very fun. What are they basically saying? That not Joshua and Caleb, but the rest. What are they saying? They're saying fake news, Alice Titus says, right. They're basically saying, you know, yeah, it's a great land, but we don't have a chance, right? The Giants must have been their basketball team. Everyone's in a humorous mood today. What does this mean? We look like grasshoppers to ourselves, and so we must have looked to them. Oh, Melissa, honey, I said earlier, I'm trying to call on people who haven't spoken yet, but if people don't come in, I'll call on you. They doubted themselves. Right. Thank you, Ellie. They had low self-esteem. They were frightened. They doubted themselves. This is actually called grasshopper syndrome. Mark Rabinovitz, if you're still online, I don't know if that's a real psychiatric or psychological term, but we call it grasshopper syndrome, right? If you feel yourself to be a grasshopper, then of course you think everybody else sees you as a grasshopper, right? The way we perceive ourselves is what we project. But this is the way we perceive ourselves, we believe everybody else perceives too. You know, just an example, I think I'm fat and I think everybody else thinks I'm fat. But it's not like that. Other people see different things, whatever it is. That's just an example. But that's, anyway, I'm just saying that, right, they felt inferior. They felt inferior, and therefore they thought that everybody else saw them as inferior, which we don't really know that, we're projecting, our own mishigas onto other people, which is, so this is what happens. The whole community broke into loud cries, and the people wept that night, right? They get hysterical. They're terrified. All the Israelites railed against Moses and Aaron. If only we had died in the land of Egypt, or if only we might die in this wilderness. Why is the Lord taking us to this land to die by the sword? Our wives and children will be carried off like as slaves, right, or concubine. It would be better for us to go back to Egypt. And they said to one another, let us head back for Egypt. So what are the opinions or the speculations or the whatever of these, of the 10 of the 12 scouts? What happened? How does that impact upon the whole community? They're what do you call it? Whipped into a panic. They're whipped into a panic, right? They're just terrified. Their fear is contagious. Exactly, Dorian. Their fear is contagious. Encourage everyone to believe the worst, Jane. Grasshopper syndrome is not clinical parlance. Thank you, Sylvia, Dr. Sylvia. All of the references related to the biblical reference. Okay, thank you, thank you. I know in rabbinic school we referred to it as grasshopper syndrome. So that's why I think he probably wasn't the first, but Lawrence Kushner called it that. He has an essay on it. Okay, so what happened? So they're saying we'd rather go back and be slaves in Egypt, right? Than face the unknown. Right. Jane writes, the unknown is worse than the known, however bad that was. Correct. It's not an accepted psychological diagnosis. I believe this is Alice Twining, but it's part of our way we make mental diagnoses understandable. Okay, good. Thank you. Excellent. That's very helpful. God threatens, so God, God, like this is the same thing with the golden calf, which happened before, by the way. God threatens to wipe out the people. Moses, okay, this is my summary. God threatens to wipe out so I don't have to write 40 verses. God threatens to wipe out the people. Moses pleads on their behalf again, right? They are spared, but the 10 scouts who spoke against God and all the people are told they will not enter the promised land, that only Joshua and Caleb will. Meaning that everybody with that slave mentality, right, does not get to enter the promised land. This is where it's stated. Of the whole generation that were liberated from Egypt, only Joshua and Caleb get to enter the promised land. So when the people hear this, they are devastated with grief, and they say, we were wrong. And they say, we're willing now to go do battle against the Canaanites, right? Moses tells them not to do so because they will not succeed, because God is not with them. Yet defiantly they marched to the crest of the hill country, though neither the Lord's Ark of the Covenant or Moses stirred from the camp. Usually when they went out to battle, the Ark of the Covenant, meaning the portable ark, the wooden ark, was holding the 2 tablets of the covenant, the 10 Commandments or the Torah, usually went out in front. That was a symbol of like God is with us, but neither of them did. And the Amalekites and the Canaanites who dwelt in that hill country came down and dealt them a shattering blow at Hormah. Hormah, the place is called Hormah because Hormah means devastation. That's, you know, the names are always significant. So let me just see a couple of things here. Connie writes to me. She feels like she's having she's back at Hebrew Union College, Rabbi Connie, studying these readings with Michael Chernick and Norman Cohen. I feel in such exalted company. So Abby writes, but wasn't there some truth in what they reported? Yes, of course there's some truth in what they reported. Yes, there definitely is. I think it would have been okay to report what they saw, but maybe not their opinion that the people shouldn't go forward after God already told them he would give the land to them. So yeah, their report, I think, was okay, but maybe not the opinion, you know. I mean, it is a fine line for sure, but the Torah story ends with a lesson in what happens, that a few people's opinions can really negatively impact the entire community, and that community can really suffer for that, right? That's what the story basically tells us. It's like a caution against doing that. But yeah, there definitely is some truth to what they reported. It probably was, you know, we looked like they were giants and we looked like grasshopper. You know, the embellishment was probably not, you know, not helpful. But it would have been helpful to know, yeah, they're fierce people and it's not going to be easy. That I think would have been good to know. Just like it's not good, you know, to not, you know, have medical truth shared with the public. You know, that's not helpful to, you know, whitewash it all. But on the other hand, it's not helpful to make everybody hysterical either, right? Like we're all going to die, you know, it's not helpful. Yes, Jane, I know. Okay. Okay. How might we relate this to the experience of the coronavirus? It's a little harder, I think. In so many ways, it's like the news now. Much more than facts, people give opinions on both sides. I would say that is true, Abby. And Linda says, isn't the reverse true? They could have been positively influenced, right, had the report been different. Yes. And Caleb and Joshua try to say that. They say, we can do it. You know, will it be easy? No, but we can do it. God is with us, right? God made this promise to us. We can do it. But they're kind of overridden by the opinions of the 10 spies that are much more, you know, much more vocal and much more emotional and much more dramatic and much more terrifying. Sandy Forte says it reminds us that there's always an on the other hand, right? On the other hand. But we're talking about the needs of the individual versus the needs of the community. There's no question that the 10 spies were scared, but they were the chieftains. And when your leadership terrifies you, right, then it's not good, right? Leadership comes from the top. If they terrify you, then you're not in good shape. They were the tribal leaders. Tribalism doesn't help. You believe your leaders. That's true. In some ways, I think Americans are tribal. You know, we believe our leaders too, you know, to a great extent. Maybe less so after Vietnam, but, you know, we have short memories. Okay. Next section, these are rabbinic texts. Never send to know for whom the bell tolls. Okay, so the thing with the rabbinic texts are texts, T-E-X-T-S, is they're just a little harder to understand, but I'm going to unpack them, so not to worry. So Rav Huna said, and let me just explain how this works. This is the Talmud. There's the Mishnah, which was codified in 200, which is basically the first commentary on the Torah, and it's in 6 volumes. written in 200. The Torah was codified between 800 and 300 before the Common Era. During those 500 years, 500 years later, we get the Mishnah. But the Mishnah is 200 years of rabbis talking to each other, compiled by topic. So the Mishnah took the whole Torah and divided it into 6 topics. So there are 6 orders of the Mishnah. Who knows one from the Passover Seder? 6 are the volumes of the Mishnah. I don't remember the exact words, but anyway, okay, Betsy, we'll miss you, sweetheart. We'll send out the sheet. Right. Yes, Earl Marie. Yes, we'll get to your comment at the end. Absolutely. In those days, courage was the highest character trait and cowardice the lowest, so God was disgusted. Yeah, that's true. God was disgusted for sure. Okay, so so that was in 200. 300 years later, the Babylonian Talmud is codified, meaning completed, in the year 500 CE, and that has 300 years of commenting on the 200 years of commenting from the Mishnah. And then in 600, 100 years later, the Jerusalem Talmud is codified. So basically what happens is, imagine that you have a giant chat room and people are talking to each other, but across time and space. So Rabbi Elizabeth writes something in the year 200, and in the year 400, Rabbi Shelley comments on that. So you have like a giant chat room with people talking to each other, but across time and space. This is called, I think it's called something like multivalenced or something. Anyway, I'll remember it. Okay. Rav Huna said there was a certain resident of an alleyway who set up a mill in the alleyway and earned his living grinding grain for people. So your neighbor is a grain grinder, right? In his backyard, there's a grain grinder. And subsequently, another resident of the alleyway came and set up a mill next to his. Uh-oh. The halakha, which means Jewish law, is that the first neighbor with the mill may prevent the second neighbor with the new mill from doing so if he wishes, as he can say to him, "You are disrupting my livelihood by taking my customers." So the Gemara answers, so the Gemara is from the Talmud. So this is, we don't even know how many years later. This entire matter is a dispute between Tanaim, between these first and second century rabbis, as is taught in a Braita, which is a piece of teaching from that Mishnaic era that was not included in the Mishnah. Just trust me. The residents of an alleyway can compel one another to agree not to allow among them in that alleyway a tailor, a tanner, a teacher of children, or any type of craftsman. They can bar outside craftsmen from plying their trade in that alleyway. But one cannot compel his neighbor, one who already lives in the alleyway, to refrain from practicing a particular occupation there. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says, one can even compel his neighbor not to conduct such work in the alleyway, and Rav Huna holds in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. So the Mishnah and the Talmud, they record the law, but they also record the minority opinion. So we're getting 2 different opinions here. And they tell you what both of them are, but they tell you which one ended up being the law. It's kind of like the Supreme Court opinions. They have a majority opinion and a minority opinion, right? And you see them both. And even though the majority opinion carries, sometimes what's in the minority opinion is extraordinarily important. Okay. Does anyone have a right to make a living anywhere they please? This, Earl Marie, is kind of going back to your comment that yes, we have to keep people safe from the virus, but people also have a right to put food on their table. So according to this Talmudic story, does anyone have a right to make a living anywhere they please or anytime they please or whatever? No, not according to this story, right? Just because a guy comes and wants to, right, no, consider porn shops near schools. Exactly, no. Not everybody has a right to make a living wherever they want, whenever they want. Why are there limits placed on people? Well, I think that the porn shop next to a school is a good example, or even like liquor stores in certain areas, et cetera, right? Where there might be a high incidence of alcoholism or extreme poverty. And Abby writes, no, there can be overall zoning, right? So this is the Talmud's way of making zoning, right? Why might Rabbi Gamliel conclude that one can even compel his neighbor who already lives in the alleyway to refrain from practicing a particular occupation? Why might that be? What might be the possible effects? Yes, and it also led to, this is Sylvia, it also led to redlining, creating blights in specific neighborhoods, zoning and licensing, freedom of speech. Okay, I'm going to give you an example. In order to make grain or in order to tan skins, right, etc., is there no impact on the surrounding environment? There's always an environmental impact, right? There's noise pollution. There's water and soil pollution, right? Remember we read earlier, you can be compelled not to do a certain kind of business if it's going to cause harm to people in the neighborhood, whether it's a porn shop near a school or it's, a tannery near a water source, or, you know what I'm saying? Like, that where it poisons people, or people get cancer, that kind of thing. Because of the law on supply and demand, the first miller might need to lower his fees to the point that he can no longer support his family, for sure. Tanning skins has a huge impact on neighborhoods when done en masse, exactly. But there are reasons. So here's for an example. There could be certain businesses that, if open, could spread the disease more rapidly because of maybe of the proximity that the workers have to have to each other. Like I'm thinking of, and this is very controversial, but food plants where people are on an assembly line, kind of one next to another. If one person is somehow infected, it's not going to be long before others are infected or the food supply is infected. It's just, I don't know that a mask right, Shelley, like the meat packing, I don't know, how that works exactly, but it's certainly worth thinking about. So Earl Marie, to your point, yes, I mean, people have to be able to feed their families for sure. We just have to figure out, how to do these things so that the minimum number of people are harmed. That commercial, how many people were harmed in the making of this commercial? We have to, we have to figure out how to do this. Right, so Abby's writing, so maybe in the case of this virus, conditions will be created to make work and proximity safer. Well, that could be a good thing, right? We might find new ways of doing things that make it safer. Right, tattoo parlors were allowed to open in Georgia, not good for the community. Well, I think it depends. It's just like the hair and nail salons. I mean, if it's only one customer and one tech, and everyone's wearing gloves and masks, and everyone's, temperature's taken when they come in, and everyone's, it is possible that there might be a way to do these things that might make it safer, maybe. But we certainly can't do things the way we've always done them, without great risk. Right, if we invest in new methods, Jane's saying, right, we can figure out ways to put people to work. They just might not look the same. Part of this is a test of our imagination. And we talked about this a bit last week, which is, what might our society look like post-virus? Like, can we envision a world that is safer and healthier for all of us in some way, Right, so to be safer in meat processing, the production line has to be slower so that you have people more spread apart, which means productivity is lower, which means fewer animals can be processed, which means the cost of meat goes up. There's no question that, every single thing has an impact, but I just don't think we can assume that we can go back to doing things the way we've always done them, without great peril to the community, which is why, for those who either saw the governor speak yesterday or read what he said, we're going to open beginning on the 15th, but in stages and phases. And during each phase, we're going to test, and we're going to be, we're going to measure, and we're going to fit, what I mean? We're going to see the impact. So, exactly. If we can get a handle on testing, we can keep people who are infected out of the workplace, right? It may be the land of milk and honey, but there are risks. We have scientific and engineering talents who could figure this all out, God willing. Okay, so, this one is good too. If we don't get to the last page, you'll take it. You'll just read it on your own. Okay, here's another one. It was related that Rav and Rabbi Hanina and Rabbi Yochanan and Rav Chaviva taught the statements cited below. The Gemara comments, okay, more people, but anyway, anyone who had the capacity to effectively protest the sinful conduct of the members of his household and did not protest, he himself is apprehended for the sins of the members of his household and punished. If he is in a position to protest the sinful conduct of the people in his town and he fails to do so, he is apprehended for the sins of the people of his town. If he is in a position to protest the sinful conduct of the whole world and he fails to do so, he is apprehended for the sins of the whole world. Okay? So what are our obligations vis-a-vis people who conduct themselves sinfully, or in our case, I guess we would say unsafely? What if an adult friend or family neighbor comes to see you that hasn't been socially distancing and doesn't wear a mask? Are you obligated to remonstrate such sinful behavior? Well, I certainly would say that you certainly shouldn't, certainly are not obligated to stand close to them, or to come out of your house. You can talk to them through the door or the window, I would say. If you see something, say something. This is unlike what happened in China to the doctor who first tried to warn his colleagues, right? And that gentleman, I think, is dead. Somebody else says, Sylvia, this is correct, because you test positive today doesn't mean you'll test negative tomorrow, right? It has to do with how rapidly one grows the virus after exposure. Absolutely. And we all know you can be asymptomatic for 2 weeks, so you just don't know. We just don't know. But, this virus could be with us. Some people, at the worst, some people are saying 2 years. So, we can't shut down the world for 2 years. We just have to figure out how to do it as safely as possible. And of course, the quicker we get a vaccine, the better. Whistleblowers are important to point out sinful behavior in government. That is correct. There are groups of caregivers for whom this is difficult. Exactly. The family members who care for children who have parents who have to work. Absolutely. So for example, I know we have members who have a child who's a doctor, a child, like a 45-year-old child who works with some COVID patients. And when the doctor comes home, he, she, they go directly into the shower, throw everything that they're wearing, shoes included, into the wash machine, run a load of laundry on the highest temperature, shower completely, change before they go near anybody in their household. I mean, of course it's dangerous. Yes, there's a horrific example of a person who shot a security guard for telling her to wear a face mask. Well, we're certainly not going to be able to get rid of all of the crazy, insane people in the world, without a doubt, without a doubt. That's just horrible. Maybe we can end on this note. Yogi Swami Sivananda, illness begins with an I, wellness begins with a we. Illness begins with an I, wellness begins with a we. Somebody's saying, and this is not the only person I know this, several people have said that their children are asking them to help with their grandchildren because they are being forced to go back to work. That's a very difficult situation. You can only do the best you can. I think each person has to decide for him or herself whether or not they feel comfortable telling their child they can't help them with their grandchild. That I can't answer. That's very, very, very personal issue. Very, very difficult. It's nearly impossible for most parents to say no to their children when it comes to their grandchildren in particular. And the person who posted this, you're not alone. You're not the only person that's dealing with this right now, because as people are being forced to go back to work, or as we're slowly opening, the issue of childcare for grandchildren or children becomes more and more complicated. Because the schools and the childcare centers, et cetera, are all closed. It's very difficult, very, very difficult. All right, everyone, just let's remember, illness begins with an I, wellness begins with a we. Thank you for joining me today. And I will look forward to seeing you either for Torah study tomorrow or for Shabbat, or for the concert tonight at 7 with Chava Morel, which will be absolutely delightful. And no talk of anything like this. So, all right. Okay, everybody, have a great day and stay safe and healthy. All right.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Rabbi.
Bye.